It is now 6 o'clock.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining for this May 5th Affordable Housing Implementation Committee meeting. We will dive right in with the roll call.
Stella Adams. LaVon Barnes. Laura Beatty. Kyle Balsaman. Diane Katati.
Here.
Thank you. Lucia Constantine. Do you all want to wait a few more minutes?
Yeah, I don't know if we have a quorum. Do we? Yeah, I don't think
No.
we have a quorum here.
Do you want to wait about
Yeah.
5? Okay, we'll wait a
If
few more
y'all
minutes.
don't mind waiting just a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so Diane and I were just checking on the head count here. And in the interest of time, thank you for everyone who has joined so far. We can, if it's all right with everyone, go ahead and get started and wait on the minutes, since we do need a quorum in order to vote to approve those minutes. And we need, I think we need just a couple folks here. Oops, and I'm sorry that my finger was off. So we'll just go ahead and sort of move the agenda around.
Okay.
And start with roll call with the understanding that we might have a couple more additions.
Okay, Stella Adams, Lavon Barnes, Laura Beatty,
I'm here.
thank you. Cal Balsaman, Diane Katati,
Here.
Lucia Constantine,
Here.
S. Nicole Diggs, Tiffany Elder,
Here.
Courtney James,
Here.
I. Jarvis Martin, Rita McDaniel asked for an excused absence. John Parker,
I'm here.
Venus Sanders, Timothy Stallman,
Here.
and Angela D. Vic Lewis. Roll call is complete.
Thank you. So we're going to move the agenda around a bit. Right now, we'll walk through the agenda, cover ground rules, skip the approval of the minutes until we are sure we have a quorum, and go from there. The agenda, as it stands right now, we have presentations from community development and a city financial update today. DHA will also offer property updates, some follow-up and information from UMCNC, and another conversation regarding subcommittee engagement and those subgroups that we were speaking at on the last meeting, followed by public comments and a wrap-up. Ground rules: show respect for others and other opinions, presume goodwill, be fully present. Please, one speaker at a time. Only the speaker will be unmuted to eliminate background noise. All participants will remain muted until called upon. Please be brief in your questions and comments, especially this evening. We have quite a bit on the agenda, so please be concise. Committee members, please raise your hand to speak. Public comment will be included in this meeting after, with any additional time after subcommittee conversation. Use specific examples, enjoy the process, and again, raise hands to answer questions. And I cannot see on this screen, have we reached, oh, here it is. Nope, we still have not. So if we're okay with moving forward into the presentations from community development, Mr. Johnson, if you would.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. I hope everybody's doing well. I first want to share with you that we are making some progress. The annual action plan there was a public hearing held, and the plan was adopted by the city council since we last met. So I want to share that with you. And what I want to do today is cover rather quickly a presentation that entails the presentation that I shared with the city council by just about 2 weeks ago today, about the FY23 budget, as well as concluded an update on the Forever Home Durham Affordable Housing Plan. And so this is that presentation with I don't think I made any changes to it for this group, for the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee. And so you get a gist. I'll go rather quickly through it. You have it with you. If not, Juliet will email it to you. And so I'll just jump in and get right started. Next slide. So what I'm going to do is cover the affordable housing plan. I'm going to talk about housing affordability in Durham briefly, then talk about the FY22 highlights. That's the current fiscal year. And then I'm going to talk about FY23, 22-23 priorities and challenges. That's the next fiscal year starting July 1, 2022. And then, we can take some questions. Next slide. Next slide. So the first section is affordable housing. And we all know this, but I like to, try to share information to put it in context. So, we have rapidly increasing housing prices. Everyone knows that, has heard that. If you don't by now, you probably do with, what's going on in the economy and in Durham in particular. But according to Realtor.com, the median listing home price in Durham was $365,000 in February of this year, which is up almost 24% from the year before. That's a significant increase. And then when we talk about rental homes, the average apartment rent is just over $1,350 to $1,375. You see the national average, and you see where it is in Durham. That's the middle line, but you can see all the lines are rapidly going up, starting in January of 2021, and you can see the increasing rent prices. And supply and demand does have a factor in that, and as well as the new jobs that are coming here and the apartments that are being built. Next slide. This slide, and you've seen this slide before, because I talked about it when we first started our work with the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee. And we talked about City of Durham renter households by income and housing cost burden. If you remember, the housing cost burden, you shouldn't be paying more than 30% of your household income in housing cost. And if you're above 30%, from 30 to 49%, you're moderately cost burdened, and then severely cost burdened if you're paying 50% or over of your housing costs, your monthly income in housing costs. And so you look at the AMI levels, and which are and the number of households, then you have the AMI levels. So you can see at 30% and below, less than 30% or below of that population, you have a significant amount of persons that are severely cost burdened, meaning they're paying more than 50% of their income in housing costs. And then as you go to 50%, 31% to 51%, you'll see that in the yellow, we have still a healthy percentage of persons who are severely cost burdened, but a good portion of persons in that income range are either moderately cost burdened or severely cost burdened, meaning that they pay more than 30% of their income in household costs. And so if you look at the other, as the AMI increases, there's less of a cost burden. And you can see, so that's one of the reasons that we target persons at 50% and below in terms of our creation of affordable housing. Next slide. This is the same information, but it deals with City of Durham owner households. And you can still see that at 30% and below, there's still a significant amount of persons there are persons, first of all, who do own their own homes, but you can see that there are persons who severely cost burdened, meaning the rent that the mortgage that they pay is more than 30% of their housing income. So I'm just providing this information just as a reminder to offer context. When you get from 81 to 100% AMI, you can see that persons who are not cost burdened begins to increase. And then you notice that definitely above 100% AMI, there's not anyone who's severely cost burdened in that category. Next slide. This is a chart, and I don't think I've shared this with the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee. Co-chair Ms. Elder shared something similar to this, but We just picked the day. It was February the 2nd in 2022 of this year. And we went to apartments.com and there were 33,211 apartments for rent on that particular day. And then we did a search to see how many apartments had a monthly rent of less than $900. And so there were 4% of that, in the 3,000, there were 114 that had a monthly rent of less than $900, and all of those were one-bedroom units. That's just to show you the implications. Here you have 3,200 units total that were available on that day, but just 1,414 of those had a monthly rent of $900 or less, and all of those were one bedroom. Next slide. So this is, why we even in this picture and having this discussion, and why is the city assistance required? Well, if you remember, we've discussed this before, that in terms of the market, the market does, and all of the production you see, persons are able to get rental income from those units, and they're able to cover the operating expenses of operating the apartment complex, as well as paying the debt service because they got to borrow to build it, as well as get an investor return. And they just charge what the market will bear, and that covers what their expenses are, and persons are willing to pay that. In the affordable housing, you don't get, because you're charging income based upon person's ability to pay. You don't have the full range of rental income to cover the whole bar, which reflects the operating expenses, the debt payments, and that's the reason you need a subsidy to be able to produce and make sustainable affordable housing. And that's where the city's resources come in and make that subsidy. So you can see as you compare the two, that the rental income does not cover what money you will have outgoing in affordable housing. It just covers a portion of it. And that's the reason we even having this discussion and putting resources is to make sure that we have a subsidy to still produce it, because the height is just the same, the cost. The next thing I'll do, thank you. Well, let's go back. What I'm going to do next is talk about the implementation of Forever Home Durham, and then talk about the COVID-19 response, which was part of our work. Next slide. As a reminder, I'm not going to go through this, but the Forever Home Durham is a $160 million multi-investment that includes a $95 million bond, but also includes $65 million in existing city and federal funds. And the goals, you see the goals, we've talked about those goals before, in terms of rental homes and preservation of homes, and creation of $130 million in contract opportunities for MWBEs. We'll be talking about that later in this presentation. Next slide. And I'm going to get some water while we shifting slides. This is just a refresher on the $160 million in the breakdown in the categories. Next slide. So this information shares what money is in Forever Home Durham. When we created Forever Home Durham, we did not, community development, did not use all of its resources in the affordable housing plan. We have some funding that's in and some funding that's out. The funding that is in is community development block grants. That's federal funding from 2019 to 2024, 5 years. Home investment partnership funds for 5 years. Home funds, emergency solutions grants, the ESG, which is for 5 years, 2019 to FY 2024. Housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, HOPWA, for 5 years. The dedicated housing fund for 5 years. And then the 2019 Affordable Housing Bond that was passed. Those are the funding sources that are in. Next slide. The funding sources are not within Forever Home Durham. There were resources that we had before the bond and the Affordable Housing Plan was created. We still had contracts in place and resources that we use. And then we have ongoing funding that's still not part of the plan. So funds that are not within Forever Home Durham include federal entitlement funds and associated program income prior to FY 2019. The dedicated housing fund that was prior to FY 2019, and bond program income from previous bonds of any year, which is received from the repayment of past affordable housing bond referendum. So we had about 3 bond referenda in the past, and we still receive payments of loans, but that's not in the Forever Home Durham funding at all, at any year. Next slide. So this chart represents the goal, the progress to date, and the rental units that we've created, that have been created against the goal. And so I just go line by line. Remember, we talked about rental units created, total was a goal of 1,600. And what we're showing here is that we have in the pipeline, and the pipeline means that it's under discussion. We have projects that we're discussing with and putting the details around, and the next step we'll have the designing a contract. So there's a total of about 484 units that are in the pipeline, 178 units that we have actually under contract, and for a total of 662. And that means that we have a remaining balance against the goal of 938. For rental units preserved, we have a goal of 800. There are 42 in the pipeline that we're negotiating, working on contracts with. Then we have 219 that are under contract. And then that's a total of 261. And then that leaves a balance of 539 against the goal. For homeownership opportunities, we have a goal of 400. We don't have anything in the pipeline right now. If you remember, you received a notice that the second mortgage program was just kicking off the end of March. And so that's where that piece comes in terms of home ownership. So that's basically just getting started. Homeless persons in permanent housing opportunities, these are not production of units, but when services are provided. And so with homeless persons in permanent housing, these will say that they're completed because we've actually provided the service or helped the person to get into permanent housing. And we've completed 838 and have 838 that we've completed. And that's the balance remaining of 862. And then low income housing stabilized, there's a goal of 3,000. We've completed 1,288. And so we have a goal, have the balance remaining of 1,712 against the goal. And we do have an RFP that we just issued, and the council approved the item today, but those numbers are not included right here. Next slide. So just when we talk about the financial overview for 2023, we're in the FY 2023 budget process that starts July 1. The manager will present her budget in May, the city council meeting in May, and then the council will deliberate. But our budget that we've proposed is about $38.5 million. And the increases over the current year are driven by increases budgets for multifamily production and preservation, neighborhood stabilization, and homelessness services. Next slide. This is a detailed listing of the rental housing developments and the preservation units. I'm not going to go line by line. You have that for review. But this details the names of each of the projects, whether it's rehab or new construction. Also details the developer, whether it's Durham Housing Authority and Laurel Street Residential, or DHIC and Self-Help, or McCormick Barron Salazar, or CASA and Reinvestment Partners, or ACRA. And then it lists whether it's rehab or new construction, and then the number of units that we're talking about, and then the status. And, you know, some are in the pipeline, some are under construction, some are under contract, and that's what this chart represents. The part that's in blue are the RFP results that were just approved. Well, we just issued an RFP earlier this year, and these are the results. The city council approved just today, JFK Towers and Cedar Trace LLC. in terms of our commitment to helping them build those units that was just approved this afternoon. So you have that for review in terms of number of units, but the total number of all of that is 1,600 units. All of those are subsidized units. Next slide. This reflects the additional activities that are not within the Fayetteville Home Durham funding. So remember, we talked about just earlier, there were funding that's in the plan, and then there's funding that's not within the plan, but we're still using that funding to produce units or produce our home opportunities. And this is a listing of that those projects, which includes, for example, several DHA projects, Laurel Oaks and Maureen Road, where we did some funding for them under rehab. That was not part of the Fayetteville Home Durham affordable housing plan, but we were able to support them in that. Then the Willard Street phase 1, DHIC and self-help, which is 82 units, which has been completed. Then there's some other projects that are rehab with Southwest Central Durham 10 rehab, CDBG and home, that's not part of the plan. And then there's some other home ownership opportunities that you see below that we're partnering with Habitat and DCLT. And then in low income housing stabilized, it's a total of 102, mainly from the low income homeowner grant program and the prior minor repair program. Next slide. This is the Fayetteville Home Durham MWBE contracting opportunities. You'll hear some more data on this later on in this session, but I just wanted to share that thus far in terms of the current addressable spending, it's just under 25 million. And then you see the MWBE addressable spending where we have Black and African American, Hispanic, Latinx, and women businesses, and then you see the breakdown by certification, spending by certification. Next slide. So in terms of homelessness services, I'm going to run through this rather quickly. Just a reminder that we're still serving as a lead agency for the Durham County Homelessness Continuum of Care, and these are the duties that includes. We support Entry Point Durham, which is the front door to the homeless system. And in partnership with Durham County, we fund the Unsheltered Coordinating Agency to provide street outreach and encampment response and support emergency shelter operations and rapid rehousing, which include our support for families moving forward, urban ministries, housing for New Hope, and Project Access. Next slide. In terms of neighborhood stabilization, we expanded the minor repair program, launched with city and county funding, which is new for us. Habitat was awarded a contract to assist 80 low-income seniors over age 65 or disabled homeowners with repairs. They'll also do application intake for the substantial rehabilitation program and the home consortium rehabs. And these are basically rehabs that will be over up to $50,000 in terms of the cost. The minor repair program is basically less than $10,000. The third year, we also include funding for the city-funded eviction diversion program, which was completed, resulted in 660 tenants preserving their tenancy. The long-time homeowner grant program, we completed the FY19 tax year and are in process of the FY20 tax year, which includes the additional neighborhood of Walltown that was added by the city council. And just as I just mentioned, the Durham Downtown Down Payment Assistance Program launched at the end of March, and this that actually needs to be 2022 this year. And so we actually have received over 1,000 applications thus far for this particular program, and Community Home Trust is the program administrator. Next slide. In terms of COVID response, many of you are familiar with the Durham Rent Relief Program. Served over 2,700 applications. This is where Legal Aid of North Carolina is distributing funds. And we actually had to cut off applications early. We're doing the second year of non-congregate shelter support, both at hotels and White Flag. White Flag is cold weather, for those who don't know. When the temperature gets certain below freezing, we call it White Flag nights, and then homeless persons have extra places that they can go on those nights. And then the second year of expanded emergency shelter and rapid rehousing for using federal pandemic relief funds. And then we're working on a partnership still with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development to provide micro assistance business loans on businesses impacted by the pandemic. And then we have a partnership with Durham Public Schools to address COVID learning loss in 4 low-income schools in the county. Next slide. The FY23 priorities basically fall into 3 buckets. And these are our goals for next year. With rental housing, continue to move rental housing projects forward, and this is going to be a challenge with the economy and the rising interest rates and the rising costs. But the goal is to complete the construction with DHA of 2 projects on the J.J. Henderson site, and begin construction of 3 replacement housing projects for DHA's Liberty Street site, and then begin contracting for projects awarded for funds during the FY22 RFP and the Lost at Southside Phase 3 and projects, and we talked about that with McCormick Barron Salazar. In terms of homelessness, maintain support. The goals are to maintain support for the homeless system, expand the system planning and efforts, including planning for the use of home ARP funds. This is some special funding that we will receive for the homelessness system due to COVID, and expanding technical assistance for providers and providing a transition from the pandemic operations to the new normal, whatever that will be. We're still working through that. And then for neighborhood stabilization, we're going to want to next year, or the next 12 months, successfully manage current programs, including the down payment assistance that we've talked about, the eviction diversion that we've talked about, the minor repair that we talked about, as well as substantial rehabilitation. And then put special emphasis on maintaining and expanding support for small scale production, which moves current projects forward, and issue a new RFP for funding in neighborhoods. Next slide. The challenges. The challenges are significant. That, and I shared this with City Council 2 weeks ago, with the continued growth in construction costs. Construction costs as materials have increased 20% from 2022 from the year before. The interest rates, you just heard that the interest rates have started increasing. They're very, very volatile. And this is providing projects with a double whammy: increased cost on supplies and materials and increased interest rates. The rising rental prices and the lack of land courts that will set vouchers is also a challenge. The workload capacity for community development, developers and providers, not particularly in the homeless community. We are asking for additional support to the manager to be able to handle the different complications and complexities that we have. We did have to terminate our HUD-led remediation program grant that we received. And then we also faced the recapture of some neighborhood stabilization funds, NSP. This is basically Obama stimulus money for the Southside Revitalization Project. This is not part of Forever Home Durham, but that's something that we're going to have to deal with coming up in the next few months. Next slide. Including other additional challenges include the nature of development projects, the changing deal structures, the layered financing with multiple regulations for the different financing sources, and the changing project timelines. And timelines are relevant. 30 days makes a difference in this environment, because if you haven't closed, your interest rate can increase and your cost can increase simultaneously. And so the COVID impacts are still with us, which include general contractor availability, subcontractor availability, supply chains and disruptions. We've talked about that before and you've seen the ships that are still, out on the West Coast in the water trying to get to the docks, and then probably changing project schedules. Next slide. So in summary, overall, this is the bottom line. We are making progress, though not enough to address the need that's exacerbated by the current economy and the housing market. Just reading some information today, one of my colleagues provided with the number 6 housing market in the country. There's some advantages with that, and there are distinct disadvantages with that as well. And so that's kind of where we are. Second part, the challenges of present, particularly with projects that have not closed. And we must assess the point at which we cannot provide sufficient additional funding to place the projects, which will place the projects in jeopardy of not proceeding. I advise the council that our recommendation is going to be that we try to lay as best we can to keep the projects going, which will mean additional funding. And we're just going to have to, in many respects, suck that up to keep them going, because I don't want them to stop midway and then we'll face with no units. No, they're not getting the units that we need. And so, and the cost is not promised to come down. And so that's where I'll conclude, but that's basically the summary and the bottom line. So next slide, I'll stand for some questions at the appropriate time, but this is the information that I wanted to share with you all and share with the council. I share it with the council. And then there's two big spreadsheets that go down into detail in terms of the work that we have completed, the money that we have already spent, and then there's some projections for the next 3 years. Including this year, with the plan that's included in the two big spreadsheets. And then the metrics that go correspond with those. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? And then we can take a break and go back to approval of the minutes to give community development a break before their next presentation, if that's all right with everyone. John, see your hand.
Reginald, you've got so much in your head and so many things going on, and the challenges that we face are just so enormous in terms of the rising prices and everything. I would like to ask you though a little bit more about the entry program. It seems that I've met with some people that are homeless providers that aren't even aware of the entry program. And I also kind of went online and take a look at how much time it may take to process somebody through that program. Can you talk a little bit more about, what efforts we can make to get the word out, to let folks know that there is a place that they can go? I know that they get referred from different sources, but can you drill down just a little bit to share about that? And I realize this is separate and apart from all the other issues that we face.
Yeah, well, what I'll do is just give an overview. Because I'm particularly interested if there are housing providers who are not familiar with the entry point program. So the entry point is so that we have one place for those that are homeless to go. And though the entry point Durham actually interacts with providers. So one, if I'm concerned if there are people who are not aware. So that's number one. Two, the challenge is that we are limited in where we have places for people to go. Okay, so that's the other piece right now. And as I shared, with just as people come because of jobs, the people who are homeless make those same decisions. They get information and hear word of mouth and rumor and whether it's factual or not, and they hear that places are hot too. And they make decisions based just like everybody else. I'm going to ask Karen if she has anything else to add to that, but I think you raised a good point in terms of you hearing concern that people are not aware.
Reginald, I would say I really don't have anything to add. And I think right now, the principal way that we have publicized Entry Point Durham has been through the Durham Continuum of Care. It's also got a website and, the 411 and some of the 211, I forget what our, call-in numbers are. They have the information as well. But it would be helpful to know who doesn't know, because it points to outreach that we need to do.
I see it as like you talk about the continuum of care, like as a realtor, very few realtors are aware of the program. Not that realtors come in contact with a lot of homeless people, but if we're trying to get landlords to accept vouchers, understanding what our issues are for homelessness, I think they're all kind of related. There doesn't seem to be any effort to have the Mayor's Council on Homelessness be reactivated the way Mayor Bell did. The Community Empowerment Fund used to head that program up, and I also wonder just what kind of leadership is being how our current leadership is made aware of the efforts we made in the past and how to capitalize on that. So I realize again that this has not a whole lot to do with all our other challenges, but it's just that if we start with those that are most in need, and then try to get more community understanding about the overwhelming needs that we have, that I bet if you went out and asked, surveyed 100 people, did you know there was an entry program for homelessness in Durham? I think you probably get less than 5% that would know about it.
Yes. Yeah, well, thank you. I thank you for raising that point. I would definitely concede that. What you're actually referring to is the mayor's landlord roundtable. And so I'll be candid with you. When we had this little thing that called COVID that came along, some things had to just, I didn't have the capacity of the staffing to be able to do all the things that we had with COVID. I'll just be honest. So we, are going to try to build relationships and work with the housing authority in particular on landlords. But we weren't able to staff that. I'll just be honest with you during COVID.
And I see Lucia, you have a question?
I do. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was really informative and thorough. I had a question about the units preserved. I was wondering what portion of those are naturally occurring affordable housing versus part of the DHA portfolio?
Karen, could you offer some insight into that breakdown?
The majority of the units are actually one project in the DHA portfolio.
Okay.
Then I believe, and I'm desperately trying to pull up the spreadsheet that has the detail on it. Right now we have, I think, 2 projects that fall in the preservation bucket, and they're more of naturally occurring, and they're more, and that's probably about 58 units, somewhere in that order. And the rest are going to be a preservation of existing affordable.
And is there a larger strategy for preserving naturally occurring affordable housing? Because I was shocked but not surprised by the small percentage of units available under $900.
So that is something that we have talked about. There are some real challenges to it, which is that there is so much investor money in the market that it is very hard to go in and actually acquire any of these parcels for anything, close to a reasonable price. And the ones we can acquire tend to be the ones in need of greater funding. And you reach this point where, are you better off just building new?
Right.
Given the cost? I think the bigger challenge and the thing that has really been a bigger block is to create a whole new program when we really have capital to do very small number of units.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how much infrastructure do you build for a relatively small number of units? We are going to be looking in the coming year about whether we have some money set aside to try to think about whether we can create a loan product that might incentivize current owners to accept some low-cost funding for us in return for keeping units affordable. Mm-hmm. But we're not there yet in terms of figuring that out. It has been a really tough nut to crack because of what's happened in the market.
Yeah, is that something that other departments, are there avenues through the planning department or the attorney's office, anything like that?
There's definitely data available through other departments as well as through the county, like tax administration, that you can mine in order to try to identify properties. But a lot of it has to be done with good old-fashioned lead work, because most of the properties that change hands right now in Durham never hit any kind of real estate listing.
Yeah.
So really it's a lot of getting out there and talking to owners.
Thank you.
Diane, I see your hand up as well.
Thanks, Tiffany. I had a few questions, Reginald. Thanks for a very informative presentation. The 2 new projects that were approved today, can you tell us where they're located? And then also, I'm assuming these will end up on the map on the Forever Home Durham site.
Yeah, so the one that was 2 that were approved, one is JFK Towers. And Karen, that's in North Durham. That's in
Yeah, that's on North Roxborough.
Roxborough. And then the other one, Cedar Trace.
And Cedar Trace, it is kind of, sorry, I'm looking at it, I'm trying to, it is more or less southeast, not too far southeast. But I can follow up and share a specific address later.
Thank you. And
The two other projects that did receive funds, that will be coming up later. One is two are both in Bragtown.
great, thank you. And then Reginald, can you remind us what addressable spend means? That was in your presentation.
Oh, you're talking about the MWBE.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That's what you're talking about?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Or we can get to that later if you want.
Okay, we can do that later.
Okay. And then I don't know if you can share any more about why the HUD-led program was terminated, and also the neighborhood stabilization Southside money that I'm assuming that has to be returned to the feds because it was unspent. Yeah.
Yes, I can. So just in short, with the lead remediation program, we received that program was applied for from another part of the city, and then we were asked to administer it, and we had to make it be in compliance. And so we were behind the 8 ball from the beginning, and then COVID happened, and so it just with many projects that we were not able to get started. There was a period of time where we did not be able to make progress at all. And we had about 5 different RFPs that we had to issue, which we got through 4 of them. And some of them were multiple, because remember, we were not getting the bids we needed in time of COVID. And so we lost quite a bit of time with that. And then as we were coming out, we still had not secured a actual vendor. We got the marketing, we got all the other places, but the actual vendor to do the work. And they offered to give us, well, we asked for an extension, but the extension that they offered, which was 6 months instead of a year that we asked for, we couldn't produce the number of units that they wanted produced in that period of time, because one, we didn't have our infrastructure in place. And so it's just best for us to agree that we can part ways. In terms of the NSP money with Southside, remember, this is neighborhood stabilization. This is during the Obama administration, in the early part of the Obama administration, and we received some funding. And in the movement of so fast, they weren't exactly familiar with all the regulations. We weren't. And as it turns out, there was some money that we did use for demolition and acquisition that did not have beneficiary information, because we redesigned some lots. And when we redesigned those lots, then we couldn't get income because there were market rate buyers on lots that were redesigned. But we still use that money for acquisition and demolition. And so when you don't have a beneficiary that's low and moderate income, you do have to, you're not in compliance. And so we weren't in compliance. That's, part of the challenge of when money is moving really fast and the rules are not clear and the rules are changing. And this is, Obama administration, early part sounds like it was a long time ago at this point. But that's the concern that I have with the emergency rental assistance money, because we still have to be accountable many years after. So that's a long short of it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I have one quick question, which might be more of a process question, just for understanding. I think there were a few projects in the showing in the presentation in the pipeline to receive bond funding in 2 years. Have all of those gone through an RFP process? And if not, what determines which projects go through a formal RFP process versus those that community development puts in the pipeline prior to or in the absence of an RFP?
So we might have to talk about specifically about which projects. So for example, projects generally have to go through a RFP process. Here's an example in Southside. The process that we have, though, we are doing Southside now, we did have an RFP process in the beginning when we started the first one.
Okay.
So though we didn't have one now, we still have a contract that we're still working under
Okay.
for all these years. And
So for like Harriet's Place and some of the others for upcoming years, those have all gone.
we did have a RFP, and Karen can refresh me, because Harriet's Place did enter into the RFP, not the last one, but the one before.
One before.
Okay.
Now, all of the projects on our list, with the exception of the housing authority projects, went through a city RFP. The housing authority, we obviously made a commitment to the sites and the redevelopment of the sites. And the housing authority has had its own RFP to select developers for the sites. But in that case, we didn't have an RFP for the projects themselves. We committed funding to those sites.
Thank you.
Does that help answer your question?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. And I would just say, I know I've taken up more time than I should. And I think I have another presentation. We may want to forego that to stay on time.
Okay.
So however would you all decide? So I've taken up more.
If we can take a step back and go through the approval of minutes, Diane, if you want to.
Well, Venus had joined us and I see that she's dropped now. So we again don't have a quorum unless I am not seeing it correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like we have 7 members, not 8. So I guess we'll hold them till next time.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem. So Reginald, do you want to skip past the financial update and go to DHA, or I didn't know how long that presentation would be. Oh, you're muted.
Muted. What that chart represents is a financial breakdown of what we've actually spent for the first 2 years by project. It reflects the status of what we've spent in the current fiscal year, which is FY22. Then there are projections on for the next 3 fiscal years, FY23, 24, and 25. Those are projections. So you have actuals and projections in the spreadsheet. And then you have the metrics, which is a second sheet that correspond with that. Basically, what it's going to show you is that in some areas, based upon our projections where we stand now, we might not meet our target areas under Favorable Home Durham in some areas, and we will meet it in others, depending upon where we are. But the challenges that we have will impact that because of the increased cost. And so, but what this provides you is an item by item, program by program financial breakdown in each of the categories based upon the goals that we have. And then you have the corresponding metrics that go with it. I don't think it would be necessarily wise in this meeting go down, because I probably talked about it enough, if people would go and look at it, and then we can talk about it more at another meeting.
Exactly.
But that's exactly what it is. It's a detailed breakdown, line by line, project by project.
Thank you.
And it ties out to the $159 million. That's a part of the affordable housing plan. What it does not include, as I mentioned, is money that is not in the plan. That's not part of this presentation right here. And I broke out in the presentation that I shared with you, I broke out what's not in the plan, and you have that on a separate chart.
Okay. Great. So if everyone, thank you for that, Reginald. If everyone can take a look through that, and then if there are questions, we can follow up at the next meeting or otherwise after you've seen some detail. But now if we can move to the DHA property updates.
Good evening, everyone, and happy Cinco de Mayo. So first, we will cover a quick recap of where we are with the rental assistance, since that was something that we talked about over the past months. And then Anthony will come in, and the other Anthony, and give you updates on the project development. Next, please. Next.
I'm sorry, did you say something, Mr. Scott?
I'm sorry, next, please. Next
Oh.
slide. So with what we call a Fresh Start program is looking at all of our residents who were behind in rent during the pandemic and how we were able to work with them as best we could to get them to apply for any and all available funding. Next, please. So for ERAP 1, which was the county program, we received a total of $577,800 that assisted 306 households. Next, please. ERAP 2, which is the program that is being run by the city, administered by legal aid. There were 286 applicants for that. So far, we've received a little over $37,000. We estimate that the amount that those individuals applied for is around $450,000, but we're not 100% sure because of just waiting to get the information from legal aid. I think we'll have that wrapped up shortly. And then lastly, for those families, next please, Miss Julia, excuse me. And lastly, for those families that didn't fit into either of those two categories or additional funding, we were able to get almost all of them to do repayment agreements. Next, please. So there were 431 families that owed about $768,000 as of last month. Next slide. So I'll just break those down for you over the next couple of slides. So we had repayment agreements, which were pledges by those residents to pay back what they owed us on a monthly basis. So in addition to their regular rent, they also will be required to pay an additional payment towards what they owe us. Those are called repayment agreements. That effectively gets them in compliance with their lease and allows them to avoid the potential of a filing for eviction. So with all of those folks who went into those repayment agreements, this chart shows you that about 25% of those actually owed less than $500. 26% of them owed between $500 and $1,000. And then 23% owed between $1,000 and $2,000. And you can see how the others break down as well. Next slide, please. In addition to that, when you break these numbers down a little bit more, you can see what additional amounts or what those repayment agreement amounts were. So 82% of all the people that have a repayment agreement, their repayment agreement amounts were less than $50 a month. So quite a few of them, well, pretty much, pretty substantial number of them have repayment agreements that are less than $50 a month. 4% are at 50 to 100, 13%, 101 to 200, et cetera. So it seems very affordable in terms of what those repayment agreements are, but keep in mind that's still about 20% of what the average rent is for a household, $249. Next slide. And the other piece that we wanted to take a look at is just the term of which our residents are paying back this additional money. So you can see we have about 26% of them, I should say, are 12 months or less, actually less than 12 months, 11 months or less. Then you have 21% that's between 1 and 2 years, 16% are between 2 and 3 years, and then a whopping 22% are longer than 5 years. This is a long period of time to have this additional rent burden, particularly given the amount of time that we see some of these payments are actually going. So we're still working with our residents to try to see if there are ways in which we can help them get that particular arrears payment down. So we should have more on that next month's meeting. And that's it for me. I believe next up will be Mr. Snell talking about the actual affordable housing developments. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Scott. Very quickly, I just want to touch base with 2 of our projects. And these were the 2 projects that are underway at the J.J. Henderson site. These are projects that we're making a lot of progress with towards to help Mr. Johnson meet his goals, which he stated earlier. Next slide, please. We're going to focus today. We're going to talk about the site, the J.J. Henderson site, where we have the rehab underway and the new construction. Next slide, please. So at the J.J. Henderson site, of the 177 units, roughly 104 of those have been completed. Actually more than that, because there's another stack that's underway. So about 75% of the construction has been completed. We are projecting to complete the construction on this project in late August. The pictures here just depict some of the work that has been done in the common areas. And some of the earlier presentations and updates, we've showed you the work that has been done in the unit. The one to the left there is the new office that's on the first floor. That was removed from the main street area to this lower side of the building this is be the main entrance. And this is just a picture to the right there on the bottom is just showing the new flooring that's in the common areas. Next slide, please. And this is our new construction. This is the project that's underway by Lowell Street Residential. It's the Joyce. And just a little background on the Joyce. This is named after one of our former board members, whom was also a former resident at McDougal Terrace, and that was Joyce Thorpe Nichols. She was also the first female to complete the Physician's Assistance Program at Duke University. And some of you may know the history of her residency there at McDougal. She was challenged and her case went all the way to the Supreme Court. So with the guidance of the naming and branding committee that we have for the board, they led us to Mrs. Thorpe. And through our branding group, we came up with the title, The Joyce. So that's our new construction. That is about 30% complete now. We are probably, at the time we prepared this slide, we were talking about construction on the second floor, but at this point, we are starting the construction on the third floor of the project. Next slide, please. This slide here shows the progress that we've made there at that site. Some of you may have driven by, but on the right there, this is what the site when we still had grass there. That was last August when we had the actual groundbreaking ceremony and showed the progress. And then the first floor going in and actually the second and the third floor. So we are making tremendous progress with that project at this point. Next slide, please. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention to you is the work that we are doing under the DDMP Phase 2. As you know, we reported to you, I believe in our last monthly report, we were talking about our selection process where we were related to selecting our developers for Fayette Place, Forest Hill Heights, the DHA office in the County Criminal Justice Center. So we are at the point where we're actually negotiating our master development agreement with our selected development partners for those sites. And on May the 19th at the Durham County Public Health Auditorium, that's at 414 East Main Street, we will have a community meeting. The purpose of that meeting is to introduce our developers and have them to of course, introduce their team and share their vision for the site, to talk about the development process, and also spend a tremendous amount of time in talking about the community engagement process that we will be undertaking for those sites as we go about the development process. So that's where we are, and we hope to see some of you on May the 19th, and that's going to be from 6 to 7:30. We will be getting out the announcement tomorrow to the committee. So please be on the lookout for that information. Thank you.
Thank you to the DHA staff. Are there any questions from the committee regarding the presentations? John?
Just a quick question. With the the delays in the materials coming are things like the windows, are they like going to hold things up? I mean, where are you in terms of getting everything ordered and in terms of the timelines?
On the windows per se, I don't have specific information, but I do know LSR was, as part of their process of getting materials, that they had pre-ordered a number of items in anticipations of the delays that we had experienced or are experiencing. So as far as that, as the framing material has been on site, that's how they've been able to make such great progress. And then they were trying to pre-order material so we won't have any additional delays.
Any additional questions?
Sorry, Tiffany, I was just
No,
going to
you're
add, it is clearly no secret that the supply chain issues are a challenge across the board. And so people are getting very creative in terms of how they address that by ordering ahead of time, getting things stored. Fortunately, the lending world is being more cooperative around those things because they realize that that's the only way we can get things done, is we have to be looking as far in the future as possible, but that means having to commit some funding and things like that. So that's the process that they're using to try to get ahead of this game. And interest rates going up is a bad thing, but I never thought I'd necessarily, not I'm rooting for a recession, but a slowdown we're definitely looking for, because that'll certainly help bring some stability to these markets.
And if there are no additional questions, thank you to DHA staff, and we will move right into the UMCNC presentation.
So good afternoon or good evening. My name is Patrice Haley. I'm president of United Minority Contractors of North Carolina, and I am leading our consulting team with our work on the Forever Home Durham project. I also lead this team in concert with Ms. Renee Jones, who's also going to be presenting a portion of our remarks today. Just wanted to, number one, thank you all for this opportunity. We're super excited to be part of just some of the oversight that is happening with this program in Durham. And I get elated every time I hear more about the progress that is being made in our small part of that progress. So thank you again. We're going to spend a little bit of time, next slide, just going over recent and upcoming activities that we've completed since the last time we presented to the AHAC. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the metrics that we are seeing on the projects that are currently reporting to give you an idea how successful the GCs and developers have been in moving towards the goal that the city of Durham has established for the program. So we'll start with just reviewing some of our recent and upcoming activities. And for that, I'll hand it over to Renee Jones.
Good evening to everyone. You can advance the slide, Ms. Black. Okay, so short and sweet, we've had a number of activities. The hosted event that UMCNC had, it really incorporated all of the projects that were ongoing or upcoming, which was about 7 projects at the time. So we had a huge outreach event that was well attended. We had several of the firms attend that were not aware of the project, and so we were very happy about that. Since that time, 2 of our general contractors in the program have hosted their own outreach events, as well as we're also encouraging them to host what we call pre-bid meetings, which also gives an additional opportunity for smaller contractors to meet with those, especially if they are working in a second tier, or I should say a supportive role. So they've also held 2 of those. We held a training for our developers to make sure that they understood all of the reporting that was going to be requested of them. We've also met with each developer and each general contractor separately to make sure that they also understood all of the compliance guidelines that applied specifically to their project. We're working with nonprofits in the area on the workforce development initiatives that are going to be upcoming. We're going to have 2 of those training events coming up in the fall that are going to be construction related events, but we're also working on a training events that's going to be non-construction related for those residents who would prefer to do something different outside of construction. So we're looking at the opportunities for those too. We're currently working with about 5 to 6 businesses right now on their hub certification. So they are in different phases of that. So we'll hopefully be able to give you an update on that at the next time we report. The other thing that we wanted to let everyone know, if there are some small businesses in attendance tonight, there is a business recovery program, which is in phase 2. This is grant funds. So this is not a loan, but this is grant funds. Initially, it was out for funds for people in the restaurant or the hospitality industry. Now it has been opened up to all firms that suffered a 20% decline in revenue over COVID. And so we are helping our subcontracting community get access to those applications and things. So hopefully they will be able to take advantage of that, and that will help them also through that supply chain issue. So those are, we have been very much busy during this period of time. Got a lot of things on the docket for the upcoming quarter. So we're looking forward to presenting to you our next report of activities.
So this is where I review where we are and where our general contractors and developers are in their achievement of the diversity goals that have been established on the project. As you can see, we're just at about $9.7 million in terms of all spend or all contract commitments with minority, women, and small business enterprises. And all of those businesses are certified by the state of North Carolina, the city of Durham, or North Carolina DOT. This is a reflection of the 4 projects that are down below. We have a few projects that are just at the point where they're getting ready to start coming online with reporting and procurement. And so we definitely expect for these numbers to continue to grow over the next few months. As you can see, most of the participation is centered in the women certified business category. And Black and Hispanic contractors make up just about half of that $6 million number. So there's definitely some more work to be done in terms of developing some equity among the different categories. But next slide. On the next slide, you'll see that in terms of achieving the goal that's been established, which for those that are unaware, it is 11 and 7%. We are over that goal in terms of our addressable spend right now, which is right about $24 million. So of that $24 million, we are spending just about 15% with minority businesses, and the goal is 11, and we're spending 24% with women-owned businesses, and that goal was set at 7. So definitely, this is a reflection of what we believe the current state of businesses in the area are. There's considerably more, of course, woman-owned businesses that are certified, but we're doing our best to help the general contractors and developers uncover some of our hidden gems in terms of minority-owned businesses that Renee and I have the good fortune of knowing that they might not be as familiar with. So a lot of the outreach that Renee spoke about has just been our effort to try and introduce the general contractors and developers to diverse businesses that they might not be aware of, that would help create some additional equity in the numbers that we're seeing right now.
Thank you for that presentation and thank you for those numbers. That was good to see.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee? John?
I feel like I'm asking a lot of questions all the time. I'm curious now, congratulations on all the work. You're exceeding expectations. Do you keep any metrics or can you share a little bit more about both the businesses that are based in Durham as well as folks that are participating in the projects that are actually in Durham? Do you keep metrics on that?
We're not tracking specifically local businesses, but we certainly have information about the location of those companies. We could certainly fairly easily collect information and be able to measure how many of those businesses are from Durham. I will tell you, we make a concerted effort to recommend businesses that are local to the Durham community because we do know how important that is. And it also just breeds better success for those firms if they're not having to travel. But we could certainly collect that information or uncover that information and share it with the committee next time.
You know, part of the issue of we're going to be needing more money. We're going to make more requests. So the better we can tell the story about the money being spent in Durham for Durham residents, the more positive response I think we'll get. So congratulations and look forward to getting the metrics.
Thank you.
I think that was the only question that we saw here. Any other?
And I know you had a question earlier about addressable spend. Did we answer that?
So for us, addressable spend is the amount of contract opportunities cumulatively on any project. So what we've done of the 4 projects that we showed on that first slide, we basically cumulatively took the value of all of the bid packages that are available on all those projects and determined that is our addressable spend. We certainly don't want to count, don't want to include in the calculations any spend that doesn't really represent a real opportunity for diverse businesses. So sometimes that addressable spend number will be a little bit different than maybe the total amount of the contract between the developer and the GC, but the addressable spend is, you know, in layman's terms, just the cumulative value of all the bid packages that are available for subcontractors to bid on the project.
Well, thank you for sharing those numbers. It's good to see that Durham is exceeding its goals. And thank you for putting those real numbers on these very real projects that are coming out of the ground.
Thank you.
And if there are no other questions for UMCNC, we will take a step back into a conversation that we started out in our last meeting regarding subcommittee engagement, not subcontractor engagement, because you guys are handling that very well. Subcommittee engagement. And thank you for everyone who responded to the quick survey that came out to you asking about your interests and what committees you might be interested in. Just to recap that, there was overwhelming response. Everyone was very interested in one or more categories, and I'm looking at the list here, and I will email it out to everyone on the committee following this meeting. We had a chance to get together and speak about it, and given the strong interest, it does look like 1 or 2 or more committees may need to be formed. Given the bylaws for the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee, there are a couple things that need to be put in place in order for a subcommittee to stand, because it is a formal committee of this group. So any meetings that you have coming together are considered public meetings. There needs to be someone who will take minutes. There will need to be a point person for the committee who reports back on the discussion and shares it with the larger group. You'll need to set goals and objectives when you get together and report those back as well. So again, I will send this list out. I can just run down the list really quickly as a refresher, because I know it was several weeks since you've responded to that. Subgroup 1 was regarding bond programming for first-time buyers and middle-income renters. There are bond funds outlined and carved out for the items. The committee can provide research and guidance and feedback on how to shape and implement these programs. The individuals who stated an interest in that were Courtney, Tim, Venus, Kyle, and Nicole. And so if you can maybe start thinking about if you would be interested in serving as a point person for that group. And if so, if you'd like to mention that now, or if you'd like to post it in the chat or send an email back over to me, whatever is easiest, we can start forming those committees. And feel free to chime in on this conversation at any time. Subgroup 2 was regarding research and analysis on what other areas are doing regarding affordable housing and policies that have worked elsewhere. And individuals who mentioned an interest were Courtney, Diane, Tim, and Lucia. So again, if you can sort of think through your interests on there. Group 3, partners and synergies and opportunities with other Durham affordable housing focused organizations and finding opportunities to share resources. Diane and Angela Lewis mentioned, oh, and Laura. Let's see, Diane, Laura, and Angela mentioned an interest there. The 4th category was site visit planning, and Nicole mentioned an interest in that. 5th group, broadening the lens on topics with leadership and helping to get our leadership up to speed on housing issues and fill in the gaps. Venus mentioned a potential interest in Lucia, and the 6th group was crime and safety, and Laura mentioned an interest in that topic. So again, I will send all this out to you, but start thinking about whether or not you would like to serve as that point person, start sort of mulling some of the thoughts on goals and objectives for these groups, because that's sort of what will be required in order for forming of a formal subcommittee. Are there any sort of comments or conversation on these topics or a pickup from the last meeting on this? All right, well, I'll shoot that out to all of you and we can sort of finalize this. The goal would be for the groups to be formed, whatever groups you know so feel, and to pull together so that ideally at our next committee meeting for the full committee, you can give an update and sort of get the ball rolling on that front. So look for that in your email. And now we are, we still do not, yeah, we don't have a quorum. We will do that at the next meeting. So I think we have time now for public comments.
Madam Co-Chair, we do not have anyone in the attendees.
Okay. Tim?
I apologize, I missed the meeting when the subcommittees were first discussed, and I think it's a great idea, but I realized when you were going through it that I was a little bit confused about how that fits into the committee's charge. And I know at the work session 2 weeks ago, the council talked about maybe having another committee to look at a report on housing that would be similar to the Racial Equity Task Force, which is not this committee. And then there's like so many people thinking about housing. So in terms of like, let's say we have a great committee looking for ideas from other places and we're really excited about ideas. Is this, it just doesn't, I'm not entirely sure I see how this committee has been set up to be the place to then bring those forward in a way that makes a difference.
Thank you for that comment. I think the conversation came about because there's so much interest around affordable housing. There's so much, I guess, energy in this group in wanting to be active and helping to create solutions, that's where the conversation came from. The challenge for seeing whether or not it would fit under the auspices of the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee, whether subcommittees would fit, that would depend on if there's interest and if there's leadership for subcommittees and what the goals and objectives for those subcommittees would be. Those haven't been formed yet, and those goals and objectives would have to align with the goals and objectives for this committee and not take us outside of the scope of our current focus. Otherwise, I agree that it could be scattered and it may not be something that fits under this overarching committee. So given that those things haven't been formulated yet, it's kind of hard to answer that question. It would be up to the members of this committee as a whole to decide if they're still interested in those topics, if they want to create leadership on those subcommittee topics. Because right now, given that we're meeting, every other month on average, that was the primary concern, is that, not wanting to feel passive in the process, but helping to provide solutions and answers to some of the things, since our market is moving so quickly. So you guys will decide that, if and how it fits. Are there any other questions? If not, I think we have completed the agenda a little bit early. Our next meeting will be on June 9th, and maybe we can cover the wrap up. Diane, maybe you can cover that in the wrap up, our upcoming meeting timeframes.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to thank everyone that has presented some really good information. Just remind people to please take a look at that financial reporting that we got from community development. I'm very excited that we've gotten that. So thank you again to everyone. And again, hope to see you June 9th. And that's all I had.
Good night.
Okay, great. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.